The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to SMRP's webinar. Today our webinar is titled OSHA Compliance in the Maintenance and Reliability Field by John Olaechea. Before we start, I'd like to quickly go through some housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and uploaded to the SMRP website within 24 business hours for you to download. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to ask them through the Q&A section, and we'll answer them throughout the presentation. We will also have time at the end of the webinar for remaining questions. So let me introduce you to our speaker for today. John is the Compliance Assistant Specialist for OSHA in Region VIII. He provides outreach and information about safety and health hazards and OSHA policies and regulations to employers, trade associations, unions, and other organizations. And with that, John, I will let you take it from here.
All right, thank you, Jess. Good morning, everyone. So my name is John Olaechea. I am the Compliance Assistant Specialist for Region VIII of OSHA. And the name is a little bit difficult, so if you ever need to contact me, feel free to just say John O when you're calling. People will know exactly who you're talking about because most people don't even try to attempt it. Jess did very well with it. So I am the Compliance Assistant Specialist for Region VIII of OSHA. Region VIII consists of a 6-state area, and that would include Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, and the Dakotas. But I just want to let everyone know that I am open to questions from anyone, anywhere, all over the country. There are other compliance assistant specialists in other regions, and I can hook you up with them as well. But if you have a question, don't hesitate to call me. I know this is a national audience today, so I just want to let you know that I am available to anyone. I can hook you up with people in your area, or I can answer questions that you may have about regulations and things like that. And that's really what I do. I have only an outreach role with OSHA. I was a compliance officer for many years, so I did conduct inspections in both the construction and general industry fields. I'm an industrial hygienist, so I did a lot of measurement of noise, air contaminants, heat, things like that. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I transitioned into this non-enforcement role. I'm one of the few field people for OSHA who does not do enforcement. So I would encourage you, I always say the most important thing you can get out of this presentation is my contact information, especially if you're in my region. I am here and available to answer questions for you. So please go ahead and send them to me. Email is a great way to contact me because I am out a lot, but the phone works as well. But once again, I want to stress that I am a non-enforcement person. So I know some people feel like they don't want to contact OSHA just because they don't want to, put themselves on the map or something like that. It's not really how OSHA works. We'll talk about how OSHA works here, but I am here simply to provide information to the public, to trade associations, to employers, to unions, whoever needs it. All right, so today we're going to talk about a few things. The title of this is Intro to OSHA. So we're going to talk about emphasis programs and really more about, why OSHA inspects certain facilities or certain employers, how you can expect us to come out to the site, and then if we do an inspection, how that's going to go, the inspection procedures, things like that. We're also going to talk about common safety and health hazards that we find in manufacturing, and I'm going to show you, some of the top citations when we do inspections in manufacturing, what we see out there. And then lastly, we're going to conclude with compliance assistance resources. It's important that everybody understand that there are a lot of resources out there and available to you, especially if you're a small to mid-sized employer. And then questions. Questions are very important. I always prefer to answer people's questions rather than, just talk off of kind of canned material and slides. I mean, we'll go through the slides as well, but I really hope that you are able to get questions that you may have answered. And so there's a chat function. I can't see the questions as they're coming in. Jess will read some of them to me as they come in, or maybe save them to the end, but please, send in your questions. I would love to answer them. All right, so first I'm going to tell you just a little bit about OSHA in general. If you want to find the OSHA office in your state, go to this map. And I think in your handout section, Jess has provided this presentation to you. You can also get it by emailing her or myself, and I will send you a PDF version of this. So there are a lot of links within the presentation that you may want to use. And so this is a map off of our website, and it shows you the various states. So I got the laser pointer up now. Sorry, I need to pull that up. But so here's Colorado. If you click on that, you would come up with a couple of our area offices here. But you can go to any state and find your local area office. And those area offices, though they house our inspectors, they will answer your questions as well. They are a great source of information, but you can click on this link and get directly to that. All right, what does OSHA do? We kind of have three main functions. We develop safety and health standards. Now that is a long process, and that's mainly conducted by our national office folks, ones who are going to be collecting information, doing the research, putting the standards together, and moving them through. What most of the area offices that you saw on that map do, and most of the OSHA staff, would be the inspections and the enforcement of those standards. So we have area offices throughout the country, and they house our inspection staff, and they go out and they actually conduct the inspections. And then lastly, we produce compliance assistance products. Our website is, I would say, one of the best government websites I've seen out there. It has tons of information. It's not just regulations. It is all kinds of plain language information, guidance documents that help employers who aren't used to reading regulations and maybe don't know much about safety and health to really understand what they need to do. And we'll go through a little bit of that at the end. But there's an awesome A to Z index up at the top of the website, just OSHA.gov, where you can click on and say you want to know more about forklifts, or you want to know more about lead or beryllium or something like that. You can click on those and it'll take you to some plain language, easy to understand information, along with the regulations as well. All right, employee rights. It's important that all employers understand that employees have rights, and it's important, of course, that the employees understand this. All employees have the right to receive the safety and health training they need to protect themselves in their work environment. They can also request information from employers on OSHA standards, injury and illness rates on the job at that facility, and the job hazards within that work environment. And then the employer has to post a poster that contains worker rights, so they should be informed of their rights by the employer. They can also request that an employer correct any hazards that serious hazards that are occurring in the work environment. So for instance, if somebody's using a table saw and it's unguarded, that employee can go to their employer should be without any kind of retribution or retaliation, and say to the employer, hey, this thing needs to be guarded, can you fix it? And in some cases, the employer may not fix it. And in that case, or if they feel they can't go forward to the employer, they can file an OSHA complaint. So they have the right to file a complaint. So they can do these things without retribution from the employer. The employer is not allowed to punish them for making a complaint to the employer or to OSHA. They can also participate in an OSHA inspection. We'll talk a little bit about how that goes here in just a bit. And then they can find out the results of an OSHA inspection. Now, as far as employers' responsibilities, the employer has to provide a workplace free from serious recognized hazards. Okay, so that is their number one concern. They have to make sure that they are assessing their job site properly and making sure that employees are not exposed to. They have to provide training and protective equipment to those employees based on the types of hazards that are out there. If they're working with chemicals, they have to train them on how to properly use those and safely use those chemicals. If they are working with machinery where there could be sparks or particles flying off of it, they may need to use eye protection, and they have to inform them, you have to use this eye protection, it has to be this type, and when to use it, things like that. Employers also can develop safety rules that exceed OSHA requirements, and they can enforce those themselves. So that is something that they have the right to do, even go beyond OSHA standards. And then the employers must enforce the work rules to keep the employees safe. It's not enough to just have eye protection, but if people are using a grinder, they need to enforce the use of that eye protection. And you can do that through a number of ways, including discipline policies and things like that. All right, so how does OSHA come to inspect a facility? There's a number of ways that we might come out to conduct an inspection. We have what are called programmed inspections, and we have unprogrammed inspections. And I'm going to start with the unprogrammed inspections there. And those are our highest priority. That is what we do first. So unprogrammed inspections are inspections that we didn't really plan on doing. They are the result of a report from the outside. Someone has told us, hey, OSHA, there are some serious hazards out here. You need to come out and take a look and do something about it. So those unprogrammed inspections can come from a number of different types of reports. We can have a complaint. A complaint is a report of a hazard from an employee, a current employee, or their representative. So that could be their attorney, it could be a union steward, it could be mom or dad or a husband or wife, someone close to them, a family member. So their representative or them, or the employee themselves. Referrals are like a complaint, except they do not come from an employee or their representative. A referral can come from really any other source. It could be another government agency, maybe the health department's out doing an inspection and sees something unsafe and decides they want to report that to OSHA. It could be a client, it could be a customer, it could be in the construction industry. It's not uncommon to get referrals about a contractor from another contractor. It could also be the media. Sometimes we will respond to an accident that we see on the news that maybe the employer did not report that they should have. And then lastly, we have reports of fatalities or accidents. So all employers are required to report to OSHA within 8 hours a fatality that is work-related. And then we will go out and generally investigate those. They also must report any injuries involving the hospitalization of one or more people, or an eye loss, or an amputation. So any of those things also have to be reported to OSHA, and those have to be reported within 24 hours. And then we will conduct investigations on those. Sometimes they are inspections, sometimes they may be what we call a phone and fax, depending on the circumstances. But those are our highest priority, those unprogrammed inspections, because that's something where someone is telling us, hey, there's an issue out here, you need to go check it out. Then when we don't have those, we will fall back on what we call programmed inspections. And these are inspections where we come up with lists of facilities within certain industries where we're just going to go out and conduct an inspection. A lot of these are comprehensive wall-to-wall type inspections, but some are not. Some are a little bit more specific. And here are some examples of those. So we have national and regional emphasis programs. This FY20 NEP, that stands for National Emphasis Program. These are the national emphasis programs that are currently going on right now. And so with these, we try to identify industries where there may be a high rate of injury or illness, or maybe there's some particular hazard that we feel is not being addressed. And so we will, if you look on the right-hand side here, you'll see the little document there, and that is the actual emphasis program itself. And if you go down to the bottom, you can click on that link, and that will take you to all of these emphasis programs, and you can print them out and take a look at them. And what they're going to tell you is Why are we doing these types of inspections? Who is going to be inspected? Who's included in these lists? What kinds of things are we looking for during this inspection? A little bit about kind of the process of the inspection and what the inspector is supposed to be doing out there. So there's going to be some information. Some of these are fairly short. Some of them are very long and detailed. So if you look at the top, amputations in manufacturing, for instance, that one there, we're looking at facilities where we may see equipment that could cause lacerations, amputations, or worse. So you're going to be looking at things where there could be presses, there could be woodworking equipment, there could be saws and things like that, machinery that could pull off a finger or even worse. And so when you look at that, if you download that emphasis program, it will actually list some NAICS codes. That's the North American Industrial Classification System. There's another slide on that later. But most industries have a 6-digit NAICS code that represents their industry. And so it lists within that program, these are all the industries where we're going to be doing these inspections. And then we will come up with lists of facilities and then just go out and cross them off the list as we go. A few other things, to note on here: site-specific targeting down towards the bottom. That is based on injury and illness data. So many or most employers that have more than 10 employees must maintain OSHA 300 logs, and this is injury and illness data. And then some employers who have more than 20 or more employees on a job site must submit those records to OSHA electronically. And based on those injury and illness rates, if they're rather high, you may be scheduled to receive an inspection. And then the newest thing that we have this year is respirable crystalline silica. That came out just a few months back. And we have, I think that came out February or March. And so that's a very new program, and we're looking for exposures to silica within industry. And that could include things in general industry. It could include foundries and granite fabrication shops and glass manufacturing, things like that. All right, regional and local emphasis programs. So these national emphasis programs, those are being conducted across the country. These regional and local emphasis programs are only being conducted within regions or an area office. And so this is just an example from Region VIII here. And so we have some programs that we're doing within our whole region, like fall hazards in construction. I put in red some of our newer ones. So we have beverage manufacturing. We have a lot of breweries here, and including also distilleries, wineries. And so we've started conducting inspections within that industry. And so we're doing that region-wide, but they're not necessarily going on across the country. And then local emphasis programs can include, our emphasis programs that are just conducted within an area office's jurisdiction. So for instance, asbestos abatement, those are the guys who go into facilities and rip out asbestos before there's a demolition or a renovation of a building. They have to do it in a very specific way, but those are being conducted out of our Englewood area office, which covers the southern part of Colorado. All right, moving into some of the things that we see when we do inspections. This list is our top 10 violations, the most frequently cited OSHA standards during FY 2018 inspections. Now, this list really doesn't change from year to year, and a lot of that is based on the types of inspections that we do and, kind of what we're looking for. You'll note every year, fall protection is always number one. And that 1926, that is a construction industry standard, so it doesn't really affect most of the people on this call today. 1910 is the general industry that would cover manufacturing. So about half of this list is dominated by construction. Fall protection is always number one because it is something where there's rampant noncompliance. It is the leading cause of fatalities in construction. And many of you will drive home today or be out today and probably see a construction site where people are working at heights without fall protection. And so we get a lot of complaints and referrals and things like that. It's something that's easy to see. But hazard communication, that affects both construction and general industry, and that's number 2. But this list kind of doesn't change that much from year to year. You know, maybe 9 or 10 switch places or drop off, but the top 6 or 7 are very similar. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think what might be more important for this audience is this web page from our main site. So if you go to the bottom here, you'll find a link, and you can click on it. And this has frequently cited OSHA standards. So if you look up here, this is our website, and across any page on our website, you're going to see these headings. And actually, this is kind of a slightly older version of it, but you can see the data and statistics where my pointer is right now. You can also find this website by clicking on data and statistics, and then it'll show you frequently cited OSHA standards. But you can go to this, and then right here, you can put in your NAICS code. Once again, that's the North American Industrial Classification System, if you don't know what a NAICS code is or what yours is. If you don't know what yours is, you can go down to here, and there's a hypertext NAICS manual, and you can go look it up, and you can see what it is. And so it's a 6-digit code that you enter here, and then you hit submit, and it will show you what kind of citations OSHA has issued when they go to that type of industry. So here is an example of that. This one, you can see I only put in 2 digits. You can go to 6, but I put in 2. And so manufacturing includes NAICS codes that start with 31, 32, or 33. And so I put in 33. And what I found was something that's very different from the top 10 citations. Here is a list of citations in order of the number of citations issued. So you can see there were 1,000 of these 1910-134 citations. That is our respiratory protection standard. That is employers who were cited for maybe not using the right type of respirator, or not using respiratory protection, or maybe they aren't using the respirators properly. They haven't given the employees the right training, or they haven't fit tested them, or they haven't given them the medical evaluation that's required by that standard. So that's going to be respirators being used to protect employees from air contaminants. Then 1910-1200, that's the hazard communication. Just like the top 10, it is one of our biggest ones. That's, you know, employers have to provide, if they're using hazardous chemicals, and most employers that are in manufacturing or something like that are going to be using at least some chemicals, they have to disseminate information to their employees about how to use those chemicals safely. They have to provide them with safety data sheets, ensure that the employees know how to use and read those sheets, know where they are. They have to label those chemicals. They have to provide training that ensures that the employees understand what the health hazards and safety hazards of the chemicals that they're using are, how to properly store them, use them, protect themselves. You know, is there any PPE that's required? Those kinds of things. But when you look at this list, you can click on any of these because they're all hypertext, and it will take you to that standard. So what I think, you know, for most industries, a really useful tool, especially if you're just kind of getting into doing your own audits, is to run this list. And again, this is just a 1-year snapshot, but it will show you, hey, this is what OSHA cites when they come out. So it's a really good idea to try and at the very least, you know, run this list and make sure that you're in compliance with all of these things. Now, this list actually goes on much further. I've cut it off here just to be able to put it on the screen. You can see the bottom here is 1910-095, which is our noise standard. So if employers have work environments that are above 85 decibels, they have to take some actions to protect employees, and then they also have to ensure that they are not exposed above 90 decibels as an 8-hour time-weighted average. But that has 193 citations. So there are more citations, and you can go all the way down this list to where there's just one citation of something or other. So another thing you're going to see in manufacturing that's quite common is this 1910-147, control of hazardous energy, otherwise known as lockout tagout. We're going to talk about that specifically in a little bit. Also 212, machine guarding. We're going to talk about that separately here in a little bit. 1910-178, powered industrial trucks. That is forklifts. So all employers who have forklifts in use must ensure that employees have training on those, have been certified to use them. And so that's something that we see a lot of accidents with and some non-compliance. 305 and 303 is electrical, making sure that the wiring's done correctly, maintained, that electrical equipment isn't damaged, is being properly used as rated. You're not using something that's not rated for water in water. 1910-132 is the hazard assessment. All employers have to conduct a hazard assessment of all their work tasks and determine what are the hazards that are faced by the employee, and based on those hazards, do we need to implement any kind of personal protective equipment? And then they have to make that decision, put it in writing, train their employees on the kinds of PPE that they need to use and enforce the use of it. And then there's a few others here, but I'm going to move on to another data set where instead of just putting in a 2-digit number, which was very broad, that 33 covers a lot of manufacturing. I'm just showing you here, you can put in 6 digits. So 326199 is all other plastic product manufacturing. So it's kind of a lump of a bunch of plastic product manufacturing. And here you can see it's a little slightly different. You got lockout tagout as the #1 citation, followed by machine guarding. A lot of these others are the same, but they are kind of flipped around in terms of the order. Here's just another example, plastic material and resin manufacturing. I put this one in here to show you that there is a slight difference. 1910-119 comes up fairly high in the order. Now this is our process safety management standard. It doesn't apply to most facilities, but this is concerned with the use of highly hazardous chemicals or flammable chemicals, where you could see maybe, they use them in such high amounts, and they have a process where, if something goes wrong, there could be a catastrophic accident involving an explosion or a, some sort of out of control reaction or a release of a highly toxic chemical. And so this is a very complicated standard, but it doesn't affect too many industries. Here's just another example, 332, 992, small arms ammunition manufacturing, a few other, here process safety management is at the top of the list, followed by explosives and blasting agents. These don't really apply to a lot of manufacturing industry. The rest of them, you can see, are very similar. Here's one that's different, lead, 1025, that is about the exposure to lead. And of course, manufacturing ammunition, lead is probably going to be an issue. So moving on, we're going to talk very briefly about the inspection process itself. So when we do inspections, whether they are unprogrammed from a complaint or whatever, or if they are from a programmed type of inspection, they are all no notice. We never tell employers that we're coming in. We just come out. When we come out, we're generally going to walk into the facility, go to the office or the front desk, present our credentials, and ask to speak to whoever's in charge of employee safety and health, whether that's a general manager or at some larger companies, maybe the safety director. We're going to announce ourselves, we're going to introduce ourselves and ask to speak to someone in charge. And then we're going to sit down and have this opening conference with that person. We're going to talk about You know, why are we here? Is this a complaint? If it's a complaint, we're going to give you a copy of the complaint. Not, we don't share any information about who made the complaint, but we will tell you what the complaint allegations are. You know, we're going to tell you why we're there. If it's a programmed inspection, what emphasis program is it? And we're going to discuss a little bit about that emphasis program and why we're out there and what we plan to accomplish. We're going to talk about your rights as an employer, you know, and tell you also about the employee rights, that the employees can't be punished for taking part in an inspection or anything like that. We will request documents. If there are written materials that you need to have to comply with OSHA standards, we're going to ask for that. You know, we may ask you for your hazard communication program, your written respiratory protection program. Not everybody has to have all these, but you know, based on what you're doing there, you will have to have some of those. We will probably ask you for your injury and illness data if you're required to keep that. We're just going to generally talk to you about, you know, what do you do with this facility and get some background information. But it's a really good opportunity also for the employer to start asking us questions. You know, if you don't understand something, stop that inspector and ask them. Say, hey, I don't really understand what you're doing here, or what you need to accomplish, or why are you asking me for this or that? You know, it's a really good opportunity for you to get your questions answered as well. And then if there's a union represented on site, we will ask to contact the union rep and invite them to take part in the process as well, because they are allowed to come in and be part of the inspection process. This picture is from my inspection days, and this is a auto body shop. It's kind of typical of what we saw out there. This is, you know, obviously a job made staircase, and you can see there's a number of issues here. There's no railing. It's also really leading to nowhere. If you have any momentum here at the top, you're probably going to fall off. These risers are way too high. It would be a great workout, you know, if you want to do some lunges or something like that, but it is unsafe. It's way too high. There's no railing up at the top. Obviously, people are working up here and loading materials, and there's nothing preventing them from falling off. And this one in particular, they didn't know what the load rating was up here. They don't have a lot of stuff up there, but we've just in my state of Colorado, in the time that I was in one area office, we had 2 incidents where offices just like this caved in. There was one that resulted in a fatality and one that happened while the inspector was actually on site. So you got to make sure that you're not overloading floors and things like that. Okay, the inspection process continued. After we have that opening conference, we're going to do what's called a walkthrough. And that will involve us just walking the facility and visually inspecting, you know, trying to determine if we see any hazards. Now, in some cases, it's going to be very focused. It's going to be, you know, if it's complaint driven and the complaint is about the plating shop in the back of a large facility, then we're just going to go to that plating shop and we're going to look at that, and we're not going to do the whole site. However, they explained to you during the opening conference, if we are walking around on a complaint investigation or whatever, and we happen to see a serious hazard as we're walking through, we're not trying to open all the doors and look through everything, but if we're walking to that complaint area and we see something that's a serious hazard, we do have to address that as well. We are going to, on our walkthrough, and we always want to do this with company management, we're going to do some, you know, recording, video, pictures, things like that of issues that we see that are potential violations. Sometimes we will take video also of things that show compliance, because if we get a complaint, it's good for us to show that yes, the table saw had a guard, you know, because if we tell the complainant, well, we went out there and the table saw had a guard, they may not, you know, some of them may not believe us. So we do take some good videos as well. And you can certainly ask, you know, hey, why are you taking this video? Explain it to me. And I always, you know, when I was an inspector, I encouraged the employer to bring their own video equipment, photo or camera, whatever, so they can take the same pictures and video that I take. Sampling, sometimes we'll do sampling, you know, if there's an issue with exposure to chemicals or noise or something like that. We may do that on the first day we come out, or we may come back later and do it. We take all kinds of measurements, you know, for to measure if a guard is sufficient, or if you know, a height is too high to be working at without fall protection. And then we do employee interviews. We will always take aside a few employees and just talk to them about their experience on the job, and those are always private and confidential. Closing conference. Eventually we'll have a closing conference where we summarize any potential violations. If it was a complaint, we talk about that. Was it valid? Was it invalid? We'll discuss your rights as an employer. You know, just because we issue a citation doesn't necessarily mean that it's set in stone. There are a couple of appeal processes that are open to all employers. There's something called an informal conference, where you would just come into the OSHA office and informally discuss and try to settle with the supervision within that office. And then there's also something called the contest, which resembles court. Both sides would appear before a judge and make their case. And then we will, you know, when we're talking about all this, we will talk about, you know, if there are citations, what kind of citations they are, and a little bit about how you can go about correcting those. All right. The inspection process can all be found on our website. If you go to this link here, you can download what's called the Field Operations Manual. And that is 500 pages or so. And it is, you know, not super interesting necessarily. It may be useful if you need to get to sleep tonight, but it is very useful for an employer that wants to find a specific thing. So it's going to tell you everything about how OSHA operates, how inspectors do their inspections, how they sample, how they write citations, how they go about just the general inspection behavior. But you can use that. You don't have to read the whole thing. You can scan it for certain things. Maybe you have a question about, well, how's my citation going to be calculated? That's in there. It's all in there. So it's a really good, useful document. You know, in spurts, I guess. If you want to find specific information, it's in there. All right, tips for a successful OSHA inspection. I think some important things would be to know the hazards in your industry, and going back and, you know, well, just kind of being aware of what, you know, using all kinds of sources to figure out what the hazards are within your industry, doing your own job hazard assessments, you know, working within trade associations. A lot of times they'll have that information. Going back to that website that I showed you, you're going to see a lot of what OSHA sees within an industry. And then also knowing your injury history and trends. You know, if you have to maintain that OSHA injury and illness log, look at that. That is there for us to figure out, you know, where the injury is occurring. But especially in a bigger facility, you can actually see trends in there. I've in the past done inspections where I go in and find that, you know, 6 or 7 people have the same injury doing the same task. And that's something that a company needs to be on top of and needs to identify and do something about. OSHA Top 10, probably not as important as, you know, just going to that frequently cited page. Written programs and training records. Make sure that those are available, that your staff know where they are, that they're familiar with them, that they're available to hand over to OSHA, because that's one of the first things we're going to ask for. And then preparing your staff to participate, especially if you're a smaller employer. You know, if the owner or the manager leaves for a week on vacation, or they've gone, you know, 100 miles to get some parts, and OSHA comes knocking, sometimes, you know, the staff that's left behind don't know what they're supposed to do. So it's best to make sure that they all understand, if OSHA comes out, this is what you're supposed to do. Am I supposed to let OSHA in? Am I supposed to call our attorney? Am I supposed, you know, what am I supposed to do? Oftentimes, the staff that's been left behind They're just, they're equally as scared of doing it wrong from the owner's perspective as they are from just facing an OSHA inspection. And then understand general employer requirements. So if you click on this link, it's going to take you to a website that has about maybe 20 things listed that all employers should be doing. And what I would counsel you to do is, if you go there and you see anything that doesn't make sense to you, give me a call and we'll talk about it. So there's a number of things on that site that all employers need to be doing. And if you're not doing them or you don't understand them, I will certainly help. All right, a few OSHA standards that could apply. Powered industrial trucks, we kind of already talked about that. And these hypertext will take you to links of all these, but we've already talked about a number of these, and we have a few others coming up. Confined spaces, you may have spaces within your work environment that are hazardous or dangerous to enter because of a lack of oxygen or too much of a certain toxic chemical or some other hazard within there. That's very important that employers identify those spaces and determine whether employees will enter them or not, label them. It's really a little too complicated to go into here today. The other one I wanted to talk about was ergonomics. We don't have an ergonomics standard. There is a general duty clause, which is this OSHA Act 5A1, Section 5A1, where we will fall back on that sometimes. It's a very high bar. It's difficult to write an ergonomics citation under that. We have to kind of prove that there's a really recognizable, easy to fix, not maybe easy to fix, but feasibly fixable problem that the employer should be on top of. But ergonomics is a real issue. There is, as I said, there's not an OSHA standard, but if you are put on the list to be inspected because of high rates of injuries or illnesses, they're generally going to be tied to ergonomics. It's, back pulls and strains and things like that. So they can really, focusing on your ergonomic issues will really help an employer to bring down those rates of injuries and illnesses. Machine guarding, I did want to touch on that. That's 1910, starts at 1910-212 basically, and it's subpart O of the standard. And what these standards generally require is that employers guard parts of machinery where employees could catch their fingers, hands, clothing, get pulled in, resulting in lacerations or amputations or worse. Like I said, it starts around section 212, and that's kind of our general section on machine guarding. And it has general requirements about guarding the point of operation where like cutting or shaping or boring of stock occurs. It also talks about guarding things like rotating parts or in-running nip points where employees could get caught. Employees really should, or I should say employers should take the appropriate measures to prevent employee contact with these moving parts. And that can be done through the use of safeguards. They should be durable safeguards that aren't easily removed. And then guarding mechanisms can include things like fixed guards, interlocked guards, self-adjusting guards, like, back to the example of a table saw, you've got a table saw guard. As you push a piece through, it kind of moves up to just let that piece through, and then it will go back down. So that would be an example of a self-adjusting. Pullback or restraint devices. The guy in the picture there, he is using a pullback device. So this allows access when that ram is in the up position, and then before it can go down, it will pull back and withdraw his hands out of that zone. And then two-hand controls that require both hands to be in a certain area away from the point of contact, things like that, and gates. And then some equipment has more specific requirements in other sections of subpart O. That would include things like fans, abrasive wheels, woodworking equipment, stuff. Lockout, tagout. I wanted to talk a little bit, very briefly about that. This is a subject like confined space that is very time for it in today's discussion, but it's about the control of hazardous energy. Employers basically need to ensure that When work is done on machinery that the unit has been shut off and that the energy source to the machine has been cut off and locked out. Energy sources are, they're not just electrical, but they can include, mechanical, hydraulic, pneumatic, thermal, those kinds of things. And keep in mind that this covers servicing and maintenance, as well as normal production operations where maybe a guard is bypassed or a body part is placed in a hazardous area. And then compliance with the standard. It includes developing written programs with specific procedures. It involves training of the employees. Now that's not just the maintenance employees, but that's also, any employees that may have exposure there. So you're going to have authorized employees who are allowed to lock out and work on equipment. And you're going to have what's called affected employees who may be working in the area, or maybe that's their normal machine and they don't lock it out or tag it out, but they are affected by that work that's being done. And then a periodic review of the program and evaluating to make sure that it's being done correctly. That's also important. And I didn't put it on here, but I would say enforcement of these procedures. That's really important as well. And you can, if you click on some of these things, it'll take you to links. We have a lockout tagout e-tool that really is pretty useful. We have this easy to use employer guide on lockout tagout here. And if you click on these links or these images, they will take you to those links. Protecting temporary workers. I just want to briefly talk about this. Keep in mind that as an employer, you are responsible for all the employees that you control. So if you are a host employer using staffing agency employees, you must provide them with the same training and protections that your normal employees get. We see a disproportionate rate of injuries and illnesses to temporary workers because some employers just feel like they're bringing these guys in for 3 days of work, and so they don't want to spend a day giving them forklift training and certifying them on that. They just need them to move the pallets from one side of the warehouse to the other. And they're unfamiliar with the work environment, they're unfamiliar with the hazards, and so they get injured. But keep in mind, you are responsible for those employees and making sure that they have the right training, the right protection, PPE, all that stuff. And if there's an injury of those employees, they're generally going to go on the host employer's log. There are a few exceptions, but not too many. Now I'm going to talk about compliance assistance. So every state in the country has what's called an OSHA consultation program. And these are state programs. They're federally funded or largely federally funded. And they will help employers to conduct worksite evaluations, write safety and health programs, conduct sampling, do a whole bunch of stuff, training, all kinds of things that the employer may need. And one of the big ones is doing the worksite audit, which is going to resemble an OSHA style inspection, except instead of getting citations, you just get a report that says, hey, here are some things you need to fix. And this is totally free. It's totally confidential for small to mid-size employers. And you can see from this stat here, in 2017, they did 26,000 visits across the country. If you use this presentation, you can click on this map to get to a link that will show you the state consultation program in your state, so you can contact them and schedule something if you'd like. And they are very, very useful for employers. They get the same type of training that the OSHA inspectors get. Here's the one out of Colorado. This is specifically the Colorado website. It's run out of Colorado State University. Here again, as I've mentioned these things, some of the things that they can do for you. And again, it's free and confidential. They are not going to tell enforcement what goes on there. Now, they are all required if an employer does not fix serious hazards to eventually turn that over to enforcement and let us know. But that almost never occurs. I've been working for OSHA 15 years and I don't recall that happening ever except for one time, and that was a pretty egregious case. There were real serious hazards the employer wouldn't fix, but they really work with their employers. I mean, I can attest to what I've seen from the Colorado program. They're really highly educated. The ones out here, a lot of them are certified industrial hygienists or certified safety professionals. They got a lot of experience, and they really, really work with their employers. They really try and help them, and they're very protective of their employers. And there's really no communication between enforcement and consultation. But they would explain all this to you at the beginning. But they're really, really good service. And I would also say this. You know, some of the programs, and I know here in Colorado they're a little bit behind. So, you know, if you make a request, it may be a while before they can get to you. Another good source that is not OSHA related is if you have workers' comp. A lot of worker comp carriers have safety and health staff that can come out and do a free safety audit, a site audit or something like that. Some of them even do initial sampling for free. So that's another resource for small employers. I already mentioned our website. It's got tons of information in terms of, you know, the A to Z index, but there's a lot of compliance assistance products, a lot of stuff that is plain language, easy to understand material. I put out a compliance assistance newsletter also on our main page, OSHA.gov. You can sign up for something called Quick Takes. So there's a lot of newsletters and stuff like that. If you want to get on the newsletter, just send me an email and I would be happy on there. And I think that is about it. You know, I know we went through stuff pretty quick, but I was leaving some time for questions, and I would be happy to answer those now, if there are any.
Great, thank you, John. We had a question come in. Is there any OSHA standards that protect the right of employees to report to OSHA any serious violations that their employers don't take adequate steps to address?
Yes, absolutely. So any employer is allowed to contact OSHA. I'm sorry, any employee is allowed to contact OSHA to, you know, notify us of issues on the job site. You know, we tend to encourage employees to take it up with the employer first, but, you know, in some cases they may not feel that they can. And you can certainly call OSHA. And when you call an area office, generally you're going to want to talk to the duty officer. They'll put you through a duty officer, and you can just ask questions at that time. Just because you call the office doesn't mean you're making a complaint. You can ask about, you know, hey, is this in compliance or not? Is this a hazard or not? And then you can kind of work it out with the duty officer whether you want to actually make a complaint at that time or not. But keep this in mind. I don't think I covered this during the inspection, but we're not in great detail. You are protected under the law for making a complaint to OSHA. And this would be explained to you by, you know, the duty officer when they're talking to you. If you make a complaint and the employer takes some sort of action against you for making the complaint, we never tell who made the complaint, but if they thought they knew who made the complaint, you can call us back, because we have a whistleblower investigation division who do handle cases like that. And whenever we talk to employers about complaints that we've received, one of the first things we do is tell them that they cannot punish any employees they feel may have made the complaint, or punish employees for speaking out about safety and health issues. So you are certainly allowed to make a complaint, and you are protected from retaliation for having made that complaint. And if any issues with retaliation come up, whether that be being fired or, you know, one day you were working in the office and now you're cleaning toilets, you know, any kind of retaliation, you can contact OSHA, and you know, we will look into that. I would say, though, you want to call OSHA as soon as possible after any kind of retaliation occurs, because there are time limits to what we can do, and that's generally, we have to hear about it within 30 days.
All right, great, John. Thank you for answering that question. Again, if anyone else has any other questions, you can ask them through the Q&A section on that GoToWebinar sidebar. And again, just a reminder that this is recorded and will be available for you to go back and download, and it'll be on the SMRP website within 24 business hours. So does anyone else have any questions within the last 5 minutes of this webinar?
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I would just encourage people to, as I said, keep my my contact information close to them and be happy to answer questions in the future. And one of the things that we do is we can also go into much greater detail. If people want a presentation about lockout tagout or the new silica standard or the lead standard or something like that, that's something you can contact me and we can work on doing for your employer or your association or any organization that wants that kind of discussion. We can certainly do that. I can do it, or if you're out of my region, I can hook you up with people within your region who can help you.
Perfect. It looks like we have a few more questions coming in.
Okay.
What would be the top metrics to measure inspection efficiency?
To measure inspection efficiency, maybe could that person expand on that question just a little bit? We do have a lot of data and statistics on that site I showed you earlier that shows, the number of citations we issued, and you can also look up various companies. But as far as the efficiency of the inspections, I'm not sure. I mean, we do. I will tell you this: over the years, fatalities since the advent of OSHA have decreased about 70% from where they were when OSHA came around, or the fatality rate has decreased about 70% from when OSHA came around in the early 70s. So we do see that the rates are falling, but as far as the efficiency of the inspections, I'm not exactly sure.
All right, great. And let's do this one last question before our time is up. Someone asked, in my country, there are so many private companies that don't have good compliance with OSHA and doesn't make OSHA as a main part of their company objective. What do you think companies should do about that?
Well, as far as the individual company, I would encourage any company that is kind of behind the curve to contact their local consultation program and have them come out. Now, in order for it to work, the company has to have the kind of a culture of safety, working on that, getting everyone to buy in from the frontline employees all the way up to the owner of the company, the management. Everybody has to kind of buy into that, or it doesn't work as well. There's complying with the OSHA standards, and then there's kind of going beyond that and making sure that everyone that sees issues comes forward, that people take it seriously and stuff like that. But I would say that a company that's behind in terms of safety and health, the best thing that they can do is contact the OSHA consultation service. Now, we're not going to get to most companies. I mean, there's a lot, there's not that many inspectors. There's a ton of companies out there. We try to focus our efforts and our energy on those high hazard industries that have high rates of injuries or illnesses, or maybe they're dealing with certain things like certain air contaminants and stuff like that. But as far as an individual company, the best thing that they can do is get in contact with consultation.
Great, John. Thanks for answering those questions. All right, everyone.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're hitting that hour mark, and I'd like to wrap things up. I would like to thank everyone who attended this webinar. And John, again, thank you so much for your time. Just wanted to add the final reminder that this will be uploaded to the SMRP online store for you to download.
And let me just add this, if anybody has any specific questions that weren't answered, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to discuss those with you.
Great, thank you, John. All right, I will end this webinar, and I hope everyone else has a great rest of your day. And thank you again, John.
Thank you.